In the year 1888, the heart of the British Empire was London, but deep within this sprawling city lay a district of profound darkness and despair. This was Whitechapel. Here the streets were not paved with gold, but with grime and poverty. The air was thick with the smoke of coal fires. The air smelled of the stench of tanneries. Gas lamps cast a weak, flickering glow upon the narrow, winding alleyways. Those lamps created deep shadows where danger could easily hide. A world away from the grand houses and polite society of Victorian England. A place of survival. Life was cheap and often short. Whitechapel, a labyrinth of overcrowded slums and squalid lodging houses. The terror began on a dark, late summer morning. It was August the 31st, 1888. A cart driver was walking to work just before dawn. His name was Charles Cross. He made his way down a poorly lit street called Bucks Row. In the gloom, he saw a shape lying on the ground near a gateway. At first, he thought it was just another person who had had too much to drink, but as he got closer, he realized something was terribly wrong. The woman was Mary Ann Nichols. A 43-year-old mother of 5, they gently pulled them down to cover her, not yet realizing the full extent of her injuries. When Constable John Neal arrived a few minutes later, he shone his lantern on her. Just over a week later, the killer struck again. The fear that had been simmering in Whitechapel erupted into full-blown panic. On the morning of September 8, 1888, a new horror was discovered. In the backyard of a lodging house at 29 Hanbury Street, the body of another woman was found. Her name was Annie Chapman. The night before her death, she did not have the money and was forced back out onto the streets. The discovery was made by a resident of the house, John Davis. He found her body lying near the back steps at around 6 o'clock in the morning. Annie Chapman's throat had been cut with the same savage precision. Her abdomen had been cut open. Her intestines had been pulled out and placed over her shoulder. Worse still, the doctor who examined the body, Dr. George Baxter Phillips, discovered that her uterus had been removed. The police were now facing a terrifying reality. The name Leather Apron spread like wildfire through the gaslit streets of the East End. Some women reported being intimidated by a man of Jewish descent who wore a leather apron. This figure became the focus of public anger and suspicion. Following the murder of Annie Chapman, the police arrested a man named John Pizer. However, Pizer had solid alibis for both murders. Led by a builder named George Lusk, they formed the Mile End Vigilance Committee. Their primary goal was to patrol the streets at night, acting as a volunteer guard force. They also offered a reward for any information that would lead to the murderer's capture and wrote letters to the government and to the newspapers criticizing the police investigation. As September drew to a close, a dreadful sense of foreboding hung over London. The killer had been silent for 3 weeks. In the early hours of September 30th, the killer committed not 1 but 2 murders in less than an hour. The first victim of the night was Elizabeth Stride. A man named Louis Diemschutz was returning to the yard with his pony and cart when suddenly the pony shied away. In the darkness, Diemschutz saw what he thought was a bundle on the ground. He discovered the body of a woman. It was Elizabeth Stride. Her throat had been cut, and she was bleeding profusely. It really seemed the killer had been interrupted. Less than an hour later, and only a short walk away, he found his next victim. In a dark corner of Mitre Square, a police constable named Edward Watkins was walking his beat. But at 1:45 in the morning, he discovered a horrific sight. This was Catherine Eddowes. Just before the double event, the case took a strange and dramatic turn. The Central News Agency received a letter. It had taunted the police for their failure to catch the killer. It said, "I'm down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled." Most significantly, the letter was signed with a new, chilling name, Jack the Ripper. At first, the police thought it was a hoax. The press thought it was a hoax. A piece of Eddowes' blood-stained apron was found in a doorway in Goulston Street. Above it, scrawled in chalk on the wall, was a message: "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Fearing it would incite anti-Jewish riots, the police commissioner ordered the message washed away. Inside, Lusk found what was later identified as half of a human kidney, preserved in alcohol. The letter, which became known as the From Hell letter, claimed to be from the killer. The Autumn of Terror reached its ghastly climax on November 9, 1888. This time, the killer did not strike in a dark alley or a public square. He went indoors. The final victim was a young woman named Mary Jane Kelly. Unlike the other victims, she had her own room, a small ground-floor space at 13 Miller's Court, just off Dorset Street. The landlord had sent a man to collect overdue rent. He knocked, got no answer, peered through a broken window pane, and saw unimaginable horror. The room was a slaughterhouse. Witnesses could barely identify the remains on the bed as human. Inspector Walter Dew arrived, later calling it the most dreadful sight of his career. Mary Kelly's body had been completely and systematically butchered. Her organs were removed and arranged around the room. Her heart had been taken from the scene. He had hours to perform his grotesque work undisturbed. This final murder sent a new, profound shock through the city. After Mary Jane Kelly's murder, the killing stopped. Jack the Ripper simply vanished, never heard from again. After the butchery in Miller's Court, a strange quiet fell over Whitechapel. The police investigation continued for years, but it never led to a conclusive answer. The files remained open, filled with theories, false leads, and hundreds of potential suspects. It exposed the dark underbelly of Victorian society, the immense poverty and social neglect that existed in the shadow of the British Empire's greatest triumphs. It highlighted the limitations of police work in an era before forensic science. The killer was able to exploit the conditions of Whitechapel, dark streets, transient population, atmosphere of mistrust, to commit his crimes and escape. Over the decades, the story of Jack the Ripper has refused to fade away. Amateur and professional investigators, known as Ripperologists, continue to pore over the old evidence. New suspects are proposed and new theories are debated. The real story, of course, is a tragic one. It is about 5 women, and likely more, who lived difficult lives and met unimaginably brutal ends. They were the true victims, often overshadowed by the legend of their killer. The mystery endures not just because the killer was never caught, but because it reminds us of a time when a real-life monster walked the streets of London and then simply disappeared into the fog of history. The case is a reminder to remember the victims, not just the name that terrified